Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Juan of Words podcast. I'm Juan Alanis, and this is my wife Anjelica and we're welcoming you back to another episode this week. And I do want to remind you that this episode is brought to you by the Houston Health Department. We are working with the Houston Health Department on their new campaign, which is called Todos Juntos Mejor, or Better Together. And this campaign is really an outreach campaign geared towards the Hispanic community here in Houston, really to encourage people to be safe and to take action during this pandemic. There's simple things that we can all do that things are like wearing masks, washing your hands, maintaining social distancing, and getting tested, which we were talking about a little bit before we started recording, just getting tested and the importance of getting tested, not just once, but more, frequently, especially if you feel that you've been exposed, that you might have been around somebody who has COVID-19 or who had COVID-19, or if you're feeling any symptoms, you can go and get tested. And there are a lot of free sites around cities like Houston where you can go and get tested. And the Houston Health Department actually has some sites where you can get tested. So the website that they recommend you visit is called HoustonEmergency.org. And then you can go to /Todos Juntos Mejor. You can also call the phone number 832-393-4220, 832-393-4220 to find a location near you in Houston where you can go get free COVID-19 testing. Anything you want to add there?
No, you did a good job.
Okay. So going into the topics today, I guess the topics that we were going to discuss today, I gave you a list of different topics, and I was like, which one do you want to pick, or which one do you want to discuss? And then you said you were going to kind of mix and match, right? Mm-hmm. So which ones do you think you're going to mix and match?
I don't know if this is obvious at the moment, but I'm saying very little because
You're what?
I'm a little
What?
Breathing heavy.
You're breathing heavy? Mm-hmm. Why are you breathing
I don't know, because we just had a whole argument right before this. Yeah.
And that's unusual?
That's unusual for us? No, of course it's not unusual for us not to have an argument, because it's what we do, and especially here on the podcast.
I think that's one of the things about working with your spouse.
Don't say that. It has nothing to work with your spouse. You yourself can generate a lot of hostility towards me, and it makes me upset.
Oh.
It makes me frustrated. And that goes straight into the topic that we're talking about now.
But I think a lot of people would say that
No, it has nothing to do with it.
It has to do with the fact that
I've heard a lot of other couples who work together and they have an amazing work experience.
Oh, I think that's bullshit. Like, I think that every couple who works together probably has like little spats back and forth.
No. Definitely. That's like with regular coworkers.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. Like, it's normal that because we work together and we work together often, that we often have little spats.
But you're very comfortable telling me things unnecessarily.
As are you.
Yeah. It's just, a lot of the time, Juan, it's just me defending myself. I'm serious. I'm serious. I feel like it is. So you gave me a list of you gave me a list of topics in conversation that you were reading them off, and I was like, what is he talking about? I don't know if people care about that or are interested about those things.
They are.
Yeah, okay. Here we go. Okay. Some of your topics were like, let me read some just so people can hear them. Road tripping, cross country versus short drives, and I was like, okay.
And let us know if these are actually topics that you'd want us to cover, because I think, Can
I read them? Give me a second. Let me read them. Okay, it's something like road tripping, cross country versus short drives, places to visit in Houston, things to do around Houston, or visit Texas, extra incomes versus side gigs, investing in air money. Is that what this says? Air money?
And who?
Air money? Investing time in what?
And money.
Oh.
Oh, time over money. Yeah, investing time over money.
Yeah. Things, and then other conversations like Business 101, the basics, states we visited, road trip moments, memorables first. And I was like, first what? Yeah. So it was a lot of very like surface topics, and I was like, okay.
Well, not surface. The reason that these topics are here is because I think that for me, like, I think part of the podcast, like, it's in making it more personal, is to talk about the things that people know us by. Like, people know that we take cross country
trips,
drive roads. So I think everybody doesn't take those. So I think sometimes people are curious about like, well, how do you plan for a road trip, or how do you like what's the difference between like taking a long road trip or taking a short trip?
Before it was a big thing. Before road trips, before the pandemic, before road trips were like a big thing, and people were like, oh, it's a fun to do. Let's begin with the fact that we road trip because I don't fly.
Yeah. But that means that we have a lot of experience in road tripping.
We do.
Same thing with business things. Which, like, people know that we're in business, that we have different businesses, that we do different things. So I feel like sometimes people like will ask.
Do you think people would be interested in the topics? Though?
Yeah, I think so. Like, I think sometimes people ask us when we're having conversations. They'll just ask us questions like, "Oh, so how did you guys do this?" or "How did you guys do that?" or like, and I think it's just like, it's not necessarily like, "Oh, we're gonna." I
don't know. Every time I tell people that we like cross country trip, like we've done like 24, 36-hour like road trips, and not all at once, but we've done those like extended hours, like past 24-hour road trips, right? That would take you 24 hours if you drove straight through. We've done them again, and every time we tell people that we do that, people are always like, "Why?" And I'm like, "Because I don't fly." And they're like, like it's like what?
But that's
because why don't you get on the plane?
But that was before.
So I don't know if people are interested because of that.
I think that was before when people weren't doing road trips. I think a lot of people now are doing road trips because the other thing to think about it when you take a road trip is like, it's not as expensive as you flying everybody to your destination, because if you're talking about a family of 5 or 6, that's going to add up already. So you're going to eat up a lot of your cost on flying the whole family back and forth. Yeah. Whereas opposed to if you're driving in one vehicle, you're paying for gas, you're still going to pay for some hotels or whatever, but you can find like deals and you can find ways to cut corners so that that same money that you would have bought in plane tickets, you can put into like other experiences that you can have on the road.
Yeah, I think some people were pressed for time though. Which is why they fly. Yeah, they don't have those extra 36 hours to 48 hours.
Like that's why it makes a good topic, because then we can give them tips. Because if you only have a week, you can plan a long road trip. You just have to think about where you're going and how long you're going to be at the different places. So you have to make decisions about like.
So it's no longer about destination, like where you're going to go, but it's because if you're like, say you live in Texas,
depends on how much time you have.
Yeah, correct. So, but if you already have a destination in mind, but okay, I see what you're saying now.
Yeah, like I see what you're saying. If you only have a week, then I wouldn't recommend that you drive all the way to New York. But maybe you can drive to Arizona. Maybe you can drive to.
That's if you live here in Texas.
Yeah, if you live here in Texas. But if you live like, I don't know, like you go to a neighboring state or another state over.
Or two states away.
Yeah, and that's going to be a lot more, like you're going to be able to take the time to go there and come back without having to spend so much time on the road. Because when we've done those trips from here to Connecticut or here to New York, where it's been like 24 hours.
Or here to Florida or here to Los Angeles.
Like we've had to plan more than a week because it just takes longer to get there and back. And then if you actually want to do things there and actually enjoy yourself and get rest to be able to come back. Yeah. Like you have to, so I think that's why I put that on there, because I'm I see those are things that people know that we do, and that we've gotten some like experience and that we can share with people. Same thing with like business things. Like I think people know that we do certain things in business, and I think like if there's like little tidbits of information, so the whole point of those topics is like to make them more like about who we are, like because those are the things
but what I'm saying
we share.
Is for the people who listen to us, is it relevant?
I think so. Okay. And I think you guys tell us if they're relevant or not. You guys like leave us a comment if you think that you would be interested in hearing about those. Because I think, like you were saying, before we stopped recording, you were saying that a lot of people have told you that we record a lot of like what?
Heavy topics.
Heavy topics. And I think that's good. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
No, I like them.
But I think like also like throwing in here and there, like, so my thought was like, let's throw in here and there like different topics that are kind of connected to
a little
who we
softer.
are. Yeah, that are connected to who we are, that are part of like our like what we've. I hate saying the word brand, but like the quote unquote brand that we've like like put out there in terms of all these years that we've been in social media. Like people know that we blog, people know that we've been in business, people know that we travel, people know like those are things that people know about us.
I don't know. Will you say that and I hear that one, but I think to myself and I'm like, do people know us at all for that?
I think some people do.
I think we're assuming.
No, I mean we've done like we used to do giveaways when we would travel at the beginning, and we would like do when we were working with different brands, and we would do like giveaways in different cities, or we always try to make it fun and interactive for people. Not to say like, oh, everybody knows that we're traveling, but but like some people know, and I think some people would be interested in like learning more about that, because I say it because when we've had conversations with people, like in person, sometimes when we meet them for the first time, they'll ask us about things like that.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, oh, like I guess those are things that could be interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah. Okay. Business and traveling. But I'm again, I'm just assuming that they're not very interesting topics.
But she doesn't like my topics.
But what?
But she'll say, but you don't like my topics.
But why? What do you mean?
No, those topics.
But I'm saying that I don't like your topics.
Yeah.
Oh, what I'm saying is that
they're not that interesting.
Well, they were. Yeah. No, they're not actually. For me, they're not. They're not. But there was one on here that caught my attention immediately.
And this is no les digo.
¿Qué les dices?
Then you're like, oh, not for me. They're not interesting, but.
Because I know us.
But here, I'll go ahead and talk about one of your little topics.
No, okay. Look, you got a whole list here, right? And it's like it's like a list of like 50 topics. And I was like, okay, there was one. Well, let me go into the topic one. There's one that drew my attention immediately.
And what was that?
It's called gaslighting.
Of course, I knew that one was the one.
Look, Juan, here's the thing. We've tried to have the conversation about this one. We have tried to have the conversation about what gaslighting means. And you're like, no, that's not true. It's so fictitious. It's not a thing. Oh, no. Don't say anything yet. No, espérame.
No, wait. Before you go,
oh my God.
Like when you first introduced the word gaslighting to me, I was like, what? And then all of a sudden we were in the car and there was a song on the radio, on the car that you were playing. And it was like, gaslighting. Like they were saying that. It was a chorus, was gaslighting. And I was like, oh.
What song?
That song by Snow the Product.
That's not the chorus where she says gaslighting. That's the name of the song.
Yeah, well, there's like in the song, like I don't know the song, but I know that in the song they talk about that often. And I was like, what does that mean?
The chorus doesn't say gas. You don't. What are you talking about?
I don't know her songs, but I know that and there's a song where she says
it's called gaslighting.
Where she says gaslighting, where they say gaslighting. And
I don't know if she says the word.
No, we're gonna have to play the song because they do say it.
Yeah, we are gonna have to play the song because I don't remember if she actually says the word gaslighting.
It. Yeah, it's like the background is like gaslighting. That's why I was like, it. Like I heard it because I hadn't paid. I've heard that song many times, but I never paid attention to it.
I think you're listening. I think.
And then I heard it, and I was like, oh wait, what the hell? And I was like, why is gaslighting on this song? And then the name of the song was gaslighting.
Mm-hmm.
But what is gaslighting? Because
I gotta bring up my phone if I gotta give you a definition because I can't give it. I can't.
Not like a Merriam-Webster definition, but just like the way you understand gaslighting.
Well, no, because I prefer to read the definition because I don't want to sound like I know exactly when I have the premises.
Here, I'll pull it up.
Okay. So gaslighting is a topic that we've tried to have before, and it was like, no, that's not a thing. And I'm like, okay, no, it is. Well, do you know where the word gaslighting comes from? Okay. Do you want me to tell you kind of the story?
Yeah.
All right.
Tell me while I look for this definition.
Okay. So gaslighting is actually a book.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's the verb, gaslighting. But there was a book. And it was a story about a woman, a wife and a husband, who the husband did things or something like that. And he would, I think there was like a whole, like, I think it was a murder mystery or something like that. I don't remember what it was. But the whole premises of the gaslighting is the fact that he would turn on, he would do his bad things, his wrongdoings, at night or something like that, or he would do his wrongdoings like anyways, and she would wake up like unconscious.
He was creeping.
Yeah, he would wake up unconscious, and she would look up to the attic, and she would see that the gas light was on in the attic, and that she would wake up and she wouldn't remember clearly what it was. She would wake up and tell her husband, hey, was something like, what happened? Like, I seen the gas light on like in the attic and whatever. And he was like, you're crazy. You're crazy. You don't see anything. You're imagining things. Nothing's happening. When it turns out that I think he was like murdering people or something like that. And he kept making her feel like she was crazy because of that. And so that's the verb gaslighting. I don't remember too well. I remember it when I first heard it like years ago. Do you want to read the definition?
Well, it sounds interesting, but it's okay. So here's two definitions. The first one says gaslighting is when you manipulate someone by psychological means into questioning their own sanity. And another definition is gaslighting is a form of psychological manipulation in which a person or group covertly sows seeds of doubt in a targeted individual or group, making them question their own memory, perception, or judgment, often evoking in the cognitive dissonance and other changes, including low self-esteem. So basically, I guess they're saying it's like you question, like you make the other person question, like whether what they're saying or what they think they saw or what they think they like witnessed or whatever,
or what they're
what they're saying that maybe they feel or whatever. You're making them doubt whether
you
it's actually true.
turn a situation into something that it's not. You make them question what they feel. Basically. So we try to have had this conversation about gaslighting, but on top of that, there's another one that I want to include.
Okay.
Because we try to have it too. I don't know if you see me write it down. Toxic masculinity.
Oh, and we had an episode about this, no?
I think we did.
Yeah.
We did.
Yeah.
Do you see how they can go hand in hand a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I can see how they go hand in hand. I guess my resistance to terms like that is like from the beginning, like when I first hear them, is like, why do we have to have new terminology? Like, so to me, like that's, and immediately normally my reaction is like eye roll. Like, why do we have to like?
Why do you get so upset at that though?
Why is there a new terminology that we have to learn now? I don't know. Like, I guess I'm just.
Why are you so mad at that? I don't understand.
Because I'm tired of learning new words. No.
No,
I think I just have a general resistance to stuff like that. At the beginning,
to negative things.
When I first hear about stuff like that, where I'm like, it's a new like, if it sounds like it's a new trendy terminology that people are using for
the
something.
book is old, so gaslighting has always been a thing.
That was new to me. But how old is the book?
Gaslight. So they would use gas as light.
Oh, okay. So like in the olden days?
Yeah. It's an old book. So it's not a new terminology. It's
back then, was that still considered gaslighting?
Gaslighting now is being used because of the whole everything that's being talked about.
Yeah.
And what it means to gaslight somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when we first tried to have the conversation about it, what happened?
You were resistant to the conversation. You were like, no. So I'm curious, why do you have it on here?
Because I figured that we could talk about it, because normally with me, the way I work is like, first I'm resistant, and then I'm like, and then I'm just like, I don't want to hear it. Like, I don't want to, like, I don't really want to look into that. I don't really want to like research that word or like whatever the terminology is.
But you understand that stops the process, right?
Yeah. And then eventually, like, I'll come around and I like, whenever I hear it everywhere, and then eventually I'll come around and I'll be like, well, what the hell is this? And then I'll finally like read it or like watch something about it, and then I'll be like, oh, okay, well, I guess that makes sense. And
no, but
and you normally what happens for you is that you normally are like, you know, the backstory, like you just shared, like there was this where it originated was this and blah blah blah, like usually like know the backstory and like have like, you're more accepting of new terms like that or like new things like that than I am. So I was like, I think it may be like, that's why I put it on there, because I was like, we could have a conversation just about, now that I'm not so resistant to it.
I think for me, I just don't, when it comes to topics like this, a lot of the times I just don't talk about them just to like, because it's, you know, because it's trendy, but because it's something that I feel like I've taken the time to investigate or taken the time to look into it a little bit. Yeah. So I don't sound completely like a fool.
And my thing is like, since I don't take the time, then I'm like, I'm resistant to like really going deep into the conversation, because I'm like, I do feel like I'm kind of going into the conversation ignorantly, blindly, because I don't know, like, I really don't know too much about it. I just hear like people talking about it, and I guess my resistance, if I'm being honest, I guess part of my resistance is that like the whole herd mentality, that I think some people sometimes will hear something new or trendy or like, and people will just like start using it without really knowing what it means or without really understanding what it means or really. So then you'd like start like saying everything is gaslighting, and it's like, well, no, like that could be a debate. It doesn't have to be gaslighting because somebody doesn't agree with you. It's not gaslighting you.
But it depends on how they're debating you.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Like, so to me, I guess that's my resistance. Is like, if it's a herd mentality where it's just like, oh, it's this new word that I use, and like, oh, it's like the acronyms, like, oh, BRB. Now it's like, oh, instead of BRB, now it's like, oh, you're like gaslighting me. And so I'm like, well, do you really know what that means, or do you just saying it to people?
I don't understand. I didn't get that.
Yeah, I guess that's my resistance, is that I think that like sometimes I question whether when it's something
it's going to be
so
used
popular,
or it's going to be
when something becomes so popular that if it's really understood what it means, or if people are just using it because it sounds cool.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but again, I think
not that my logic makes sense. I'm just saying.
Yeah, you confuse me. I'm like, what? I don't understand what he's saying.
I'm just being honest with what I'm saying. Like, why I resist things like that.
Yeah. But okay, so do you feel toxic masculinity is a topic, or do you still it's like a hot topic?
Well, toxic masculinity, I think I've come to understand a little bit better of what people mean when they say toxic masculinity.
What do you understand toxic masculinity as?
So there was a picture that I saw online, and it was supposed to be explaining toxic masculinity, and I was like, okay, well, I guess that makes sense. I mean, like, I still don't agree fully 100%, but I can see why it would be toxic masculinity. So the picture was of a reporter, like I guess it was like a sports reporter who happened to be tall, and she was a woman, and she was tall, and she was like interviewing a guy, and I don't know who he was, but he was like, I guess, a coach or player or whatever, and the guy was like standing on a box so that he could be taller than her. On the camera. On camera. And it was like, and they said, and I think the picture said something about this is like toxic masculinity visualized, because it was like, I guess my takeaway from that, which I don't know if that was the intention.
It all depends. Like if the camera couldn't focus on both of them, if they were like uneven in height. Yeah. But if you could, then what is the purpose of him being on the box, to be able to be as high as her or taller?
Yeah, which is what my thought was like. Well, yeah, I mean, like I can see, like, if for the camera they wanted him to be taller, or he was an actor and he always looked taller on screen, and people just thought he was a tall guy. He didn't want people to know that he was short. Like that makes sense. But if it was just like that, he just couldn't have a woman be taller than him on screen, then I was like, well, that doesn't make any sense. So then I was like, okay,
you have to think about it. How many times does a woman get on a box to be as tall as her person that's being interviewed, or that she's being interviewed by?
So
you do think about that. Yeah,
that was one example. And then the other thing that I think about when I think about toxic masculinity that comes to mind, like for me, is when the whole, like, the last political debate, when Trump got behind Hillary Clinton and he like intimidated her, like, by walking around her.
Yeah, he kept circling her.
He was so certain that she wasn't gonna do anything, because, like, I guess,
like it was prey.
Like, yeah, like he was, I guess not, I don't know if it was because of custom or because of, like, just behavior, that she was just not gonna, like, buck up to him and be like, okay, what's your problem? Or like, go back to your, because I guess
podium.
Go back to your podium. And so for me, when I think about, like, toxic masculinity, I think about that too, because I'm like, that was like an
intimidation tactic.
Like a tactic used to be like, oh, I'm gonna, like, do this because I can, and because she's not gonna do anything because she's too polite.
Well, not that she's polite, but because she's female, and that's and I am putting myself in this position because I can, because I'm male.
Yeah. So to me, that's like, when I think about it now, that's what I think about, and I'm sure there's, like, other interpretations too, but, like, those are the two things that come to mind. And so I'm like, yeah, I mean, I guess I can kind of understand it a little bit better now.
Isn't it easier though? Sometimes I think with toxic masculinity, I think the forefront of that topic and conversation is that it's much easier to smear the integrity of a woman than it is a man. It's easier to call her crazy. It's easier, again, gaslighting. It's easier to call her crazy. It's easier to be like, no, she's this, or easier to be like, and it's because I feel like women are never placed in a position that the integrity portion of it. Oh, it's never, you always hear when people talk about men, they're like, oh, he's a God-fearing man who takes care of his family, who works for his family, who, you know what I mean? They kind of put you in that position. And a woman, it's they say, yeah, she's a housewife. You know, it's never like it's never used as a, like, oh yeah, like, you know, I don't know, like I sometimes I feel like men are always more, when they do well or do good, it's like, oh, did you see that? Like, that was awesome. But when women do things, they're like, for example, like the whole like single mother versus single father. Like, it's always like, oh, that man, he's taking care of those kids, and it's just kind of expected for the mom to take care of the kids. It's never like, you know what I mean? Like we find women calling themselves superwomen, calling themselves, you know, but it takes more, it takes very little out of people to be like, that man taking care of his kid. Oh my God, how amazing, how incredible, how whatever, because it's not the norm. But it is the norm for a single parent to take care of their kids. But because there's a difference, and one's female and one's male, then we see that, right? But like I said, you know, it's much easier to gaslight a woman than I feel than it is to gaslight a man, because we can easily be called crazy and she's just, you know, she's figment of her imagination and she's all in herself, she's in her emotions, she's, you know, and even now in 2020 we're still like, everybody's like, you know, she cries for everything, she whatever for everything, and so it's looked upon like a female trait to cry.
But what if a guy cried all the time? Would that make you think less of him?
If he cried all the time?
If he was very emotional and he like cried all the time?
If that's what he did.
If like if he was in a meeting and he got upset and like somebody like yelled at him and he like went out of his, like he left his office and he went to his desk and he started crying, would that make you feel like, or if like, would that make you feel differently since it's not the norm? Like would you think that would make people feel differently about that guy?
I would definitely be like, is he crying? I would be taken aback by it because it's not something normal that you would see a man do in public, and especially not in a workplace. Like it's not something you would see them do. But I mean, again, but if it was a male who just found himself crying and knew who was an emotional person and it's what he did, then no, I wouldn't be like, there he goes again crying. You know what I mean? Like that's not what you think. Like I never look at a woman and I'm like, she's so sensitive. You know what I mean? And so,
but you know, I think in a work environment, you are, whether you're man or woman, if you are like too emotional, like people do, like that is a stigma. Like people do like
think about what you're saying. Do you really believe that? Do females are more? I feel like females feel more comfortable because we've already been placed in that position, that we just feel comfortable showing that emotion.
No, I think that females are probably more prone to do it, and they're not.
You really think females are more prone to cry?
To be more emotional, yeah. But like I think that maybe they are more prone to be more emotional.
I don't know if you're watching me, but I'm shaking my head.
No, I'm not saying that in general. Like that's just, you're just going to be more emotional. But I'm saying, like you just said, like more women are going to be more comfortable doing it.
Women are more comfortable doing it because we've already been like, that's a female trait, and so why would you, if it's a natural, quote unquote natural thing to do for a female to do, then it's just natural.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. Like maybe women are more comfortable doing it, but I think either or, like if a man or a woman is crying at work and they do it over and over, or they do it repeatedly, they do it more than once, like then automatically they're going to be labeled as like, oh, you know, they're very emotional, you have to be sensitive, you have to be careful the way you talk to them, or you have to like, so people are gonna like, there's gonna be a stigma, you know, maybe more so if you're a guy, like people are gonna be like, oh, like he's a wuss, like he's you know, they're not gonna like want you to be a part of the, like they're not gonna include you, they're gonna stop including you, they're gonna, because you're like seen as like, not that, I don't know, like I think maybe it's just misunderstood, and because it's so unusual that people would just feel uncomfortable around you, and maybe it's not even that they feel like, oh, he's like he's not a guy, but like maybe they just don't know how to be around you because it's so unusual and so uncomfortable. Yeah,
you know, it's funny that you talk about things like this. So, a couple of months ago, I remember looking back on pictures, and I was looking back on the pictures of Edgar and the pictures of me, and being a single mom essentially for like maybe the first year and a half, almost 2 years of his life. I was basically a single mother. I was looking back at these pictures and I was like, I remember essentially like when I started to become myself, when I started to garner strength, and when I was like, okay, like I'm not going to get the help that I thought I was going to get, and I just need to do what I need to do because this just has to be done. Right. And I was like, I'm a single mother. This is what I need to do. Basically, what was happening in my life was that I realized that essentially wasn't always and haven't always been an emotional person. I think the state of life now, the way people see me now, I'm an emotional person because I'm just not going through things, but because my mind is shifting things around and I'm realizing things and I'm visiting like past, what my past was and going through moments, right? My midlife crisis is happening. Basically, and it's been happening for the last 5 years. I don't know why. It's been happening. It's been going on, and a lot of things have happened in between, and which is, I feel like it's extending my the way I feel. You know what I mean? And so I'm always feeling highly emotional. But anyway, so I was talking about how back in the day, I wasn't always like that. I remember when I first came to terms that I was a single mother, and it was very emotional for me. And then all of a sudden I was like, it clicked for me. And I was like, okay, I got to get together really fast and really quick. And so I remember I switched jobs. So I switched from working at the high school to working as a part-time secretary at HCC for one of the department heads. And I remember the girl that I worked with, she was working part-time also. I had already was like, oh, okay, this is who I am. This is what I need to do. This is what I'm doing. And when I was working, like I said, when I was working at high school, I was like, okay, like everything just became routine. And I really didn't have a lot of time to like go through the emotional process of things. And I was like, okay, I'm upset. I'm mad. I need to move on. You know what I mean? Like I garnered that momentum just to like okay, like you really don't have a lot of time to think, right? There's this strength that comes from somewhere within you. Like I feels like lightning bolts that come from nowhere, that you're like, oh, just it has to work. Oh, I just got to do it, right? And so I was aware of who I was, and I just became like into existence, and I was like, okay, this is who I am. And so when I moved from there to working at HCC, I remember the girl that was working part-time, she was highly emotional. She was like constantly like at the verge of tears. She was constantly like running out of the room. She was like not doing her work, and so I was the one picking up the slack. I remember she had a task and I was supposed to finish the task, and I would go back in and I'd be like, she didn't do anything. Like, I gotta do it now. Like, I remember all of that. You know what I mean? And so where was I going with this?
I don't know. You were saying like, was that an example of like what, like gaslighting or like? No, or
so much time has passed by because the thing turned off and we had to like restart because whatever. And I'm completely confused as to what we were talking about.
Maybe you were talking about emotional, like her being emotional at work. Because what I was saying is that the stigma of like being too emotional, whether you're a guy or a woman, like that you're gonna get a stigma if you're crying every other meeting, or if you're like that, because it's unusual. And I think that what I was saying also was that if you're not used to like a guy crying so much, that maybe that guy's not going to be included anymore in things, because maybe it's not so much that you don't want to be around him or that you don't like the person, but you just don't understand how to interact with them because you're not used to that behavior. Yeah. So that's where we were going, and then you started talking about your experience at work.
Yeah, and so I guess basically that I had a premises to this, but like I said, things happened here that we had to cut off and come back on. But yeah, so I recognize, that it's emotions like that, high emotions like that, are temporarily, and it's not forever in your life. Like, it's not an always thing. People, so what happens is sometimes when they meet you in that point of your life, they staple you with that. So that becomes forever your like badge. Right? They put that on you like she's always emotional. No, that's not necessarily true. It's una etapa of your life. It's a portion.
Just a season of your life.
It's a season of your life. Thank you. It's a season of your life that happens. Just like being the strong person, it's a season. Like, we all go through like
And that makes sense, because I think like if a guy, like I think people are more accepting if somebody, if a man is mourning, or a man is like, you know, like he lost, you know, a child, or a man lost his wife, or a man, you know, like people,
a mom or dad,
then people are like more like accepting of that person being emotional. Then it's like, oh, okay, there's a reason for that person to be emotional. And
obvious reason.
And it's a season. But I think maybe, you know, in this instance, maybe she didn't lose somebody, but maybe she was just going through a season in her life where she was very emotional. And people don't...
Or she was trying to configure things out,
And people don't accept it and don't understand that, like, you know what? Maybe she's, you know, she doesn't have the reason that's, like, socially acceptable to be crying. But, you know, she does have a reason. You know, she's just not, like, crying because she wants to cry all the time.
She's just going through it,
Yeah.
But, so, that's basically...
What I thought about was, sorry, you were going to say something?
No, go ahead.
No, what I thought about, and I wanted to ask you about, because I don't know if you heard of that, when the Captain America guy, he released his, like, he accidentally released a picture of his penis on
No, I didn't
Twitter.
hear about it, no.
And it was a dick pic that he came out automatic, like on his picture, and on his, like, on his phone, and then, like, people on Twitter started sharing it because he accidentally tweeted it.
My God.
And then his fans came and like started tweeting like other pictures of him to flood that hashtag that was being used, so that they could bury the pictures of him, and they came to his defense. And I think it made me think about that, because in that documentary that Paris Hilton did, like she talked about like how her sex tape was like such a joke for like everybody was like making fun of it, and like everybody was like, and she was like comparing like if
did you watch it?
Yeah, I watched clips of it.
Okay.
And then she was saying like, if it happened now, like
it wouldn't be allowed.
It wouldn't have been accepted. Like people would have come to her defense, but they didn't come to her defense back then. Everybody just kind of laughed about it, and everybody shared it, and it was like a big thing. It was like a big joke.
People would make it, people on. She talks about how even like oh, okay, like it would have never happened, but it would have been like perfectly fine. Like even late night talk show hosts were talking about it. Like it was, you know, it was
like
part of culture. Yeah,
it was fair game.
It was fair game for her. Yeah, but that she didn't even release it. It was somebody else that did.
So do you think like that's like an example of like toxic masculinity?
I think that's a form of gaslighting.
Gaslighting?
Yeah, because now at this point, she's no longer, at that point in her life, she would, whatever it is that she was talking about and doing, nobody was exactly like taking that serious. Like whatever she's doing now, had that been, she'd been trying to do that then, they would have used like what was happening to her past, been like, she's crazy, she's that, because look at her sex video, look what she does, look what, you know, a form of like discrediting anybody. The first thing you want to do is gaslight them. It's like why are you so emotional, or what are you talking about, or that's not the way it was taken, that's not the way it was said, oh you're being sent, or as recently, you're such a snowflake.
But right? You know what, like I'm not the biggest fan, and I really don't feel that sorry for Paris Hilton, but because I think she's like turned it around. But I did, when she said that, I was like, oh, that makes sense in terms of like what she's saying, that comparing then to now, and how everybody would come, like how it's now is like so not acceptable. And to me, that was like, oh, well, I guess that's like a shift that has happened in some way. Like now people are much more like willing to come out and say, oh no, don't share that, like that video of the person like all over the internet, like, or like what happened with him. I think that was a good example that like people were like so like willing to jump forward. But I think some of the criticism they got for that were like, well, if it was a woman, would you guys come up and be as willing to come forward and to like try to rescue her as you were to rescue him
if they didn't share things? Because we have people in pop culture now who are more than willing to share things the way they are, who, because they've decided that this is the way it is, because they decided this is who I want you, this is part of who I am, and this is what I want to share, or like willingly share.
Well, think about like even when like Janet Jackson's like when she had the whole like incident where her like
the infamous nip slip at the at the halftime show.
You know I had to do it, had to. You back up on your bullshit. Don't belong to me. You acting all sleazy. I don't like what I see.
Hey, this is Anjelica Casares.
And this is Juan Alanis.
Thank you so much for joining us on season 2 of Juan Words Podcast. You can find us on
Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, on Stitcher, Spotify, and other platforms. Also on our website at juanawords.com. And we hope you enjoyed the episode that you're listening to right now.
And if you enjoyed it, you can leave us a review and a thumbs up. If especially on the Apple platform, the higher ratings and the reviews we get, the more listeners we actually can be found by.
Yeah.
So
it really does help us. So we really would appreciate it, a rating or a review on Apple Podcast. And until next time, thank you.
See you then. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Back up on my piece shit. I don't care if you don't like it. I'm really different. Don't gotta show you I'm like that.
And we're back. Okay, so yeah. So you were saying that it's not acceptable now for Janet Jackson to no. Nobody really comes to the defense of women than they do with a man.
Oh, I mean, I guess my thing is my question is if a woman I don't know, a relevant star right now, female star, were to come out and have her accidentally have slipped a picture of her nude, would that have would people have come to her defense, or would people have spread that everywhere? I mean, ooh, you want to see so and so naked? Here's a picture of her. And I feel like it would have maybe they wouldn't have, people wouldn't have, there would have been more of a split. More of a split, that maybe there would be more of
I never understood the I've never understood the obsession with seeing people it's celebrities naked, an accidental naked
people
nudes.
that are not celebrities. People want to see them naked too. So
no, I never seen things that have been shared and people are like, did you see that? Let's go look at them naked. And I'm I've never seen the obsession of it over it.
But I think I do think that maybe there wouldn't have been as much or there would have been more of a split in terms of more people, some people wanting to see it and some people wanting to to come to the defense of a female star. So that was interesting. But just to I guess to bring it back to gaslighting, I guess I still kind of struggle with understanding it, because sometimes I think if you are having a discussion and you are having a disagreement, especially if you're arguing, because you don't necessarily agree with what the other person is saying, or because you don't necessarily have the same point of view, is that necessarily gaslighting? Just
why
because
would that be gaslighting?
I don't know, because I feel like sometimes
it's not gaslighting.
Because I feel like sometimes it could be misinterpreted, oh, well, you're trying to say that I'm crazy. You're trying to say that I'm not. What I said is not the way things happen, but what you said is the way things happen. And then you start feeling I think that's when you kind of run into a gray area to me.
Well, I think no, there's no gray area when it comes to gaslighting, because you can have a different interpretation of what happened, and so can I. But the matter of the fact is simple, that you take it one way, I take it another way, which means you have feelings on one way and I have feelings on it another way. But where the gaslighting comes in is when you start telling the other person, no, that's not true. No, that's not what I did. No, that's not. You're feeling that, you feel like that because you want to feel like that.
But isn't that most arguments for a lot of people? Isn't that a lot of times your argument is no, that's not the way it happened. That's not the way that it happened. People will go back and forth that. That's not the way it happened. And I guess my thing is if you, just because you say that's not the way it happened, does that necessarily mean that you're gaslighting that person? You're trying to manipulate them to make them feel crazy. Does that mean that you're trying to manipulate them to make them feel crazy?
No, if you're talking about
their recollection of the events that happened.
Okay, let me backtrack. Let me tell you again like this. There's a clear difference when you're telling me how you feel about things. Yeah. But are you telling me your feelings because you want to misinterpret my feelings?
No.
You're telling me what's your intention with doing the things that you do? Is it to say that what I'm experiencing or what I've seen or what the obvious or what the truth is? Are you trying to skew it? Or were you sincerely the party that also is in confusion as to what happened? There's obvious difference. What are you using this information? Why are you using these words? Why are you doing this? Is it to discredit somebody else?
But I don't. Okay, but I guess I'm saying like if you're talking about like the course of events. So like if like you're saying like, oh, well, the way things
The course
happen,
of events aren't up for discussion.
but they are sometimes. Like sometimes like people can remember things, especially when you're having an argument or when you're in a heated situation where you say, well, you said this and you said that, and then you're like, and the other person says, no, well, I said that because you said this, and so that you have a disagreement.
You're trying to be logical with this.
No, I'm saying
You have to disconnect with the logic of it.
No, but wait, let me finish my like analogy out, because then the other person says, like, so there's a disagreement in terms of the way things happened. So then, because there's a disagreement in the way things happen, does that necessarily mean that the intention is to manipulate you to make you feel crazy or to make you feel like the way that you think the way things happened that was not true?
Okay. Let me reiterate. It's simple. What you do with the information, is it to discredit me? Is it absolutely necessary that you try to say that the turn of events or the term of events were a certain way if it didn't affect you the way it affected me?
But I guess that's the thing. Like, how do you know whether it affected somebody more than it affected somebody else?
Because you have to look at the situation as a whole. You're trying to bring logic. Like, if you want to be logical about it, then look at it in terms of like the whole thing. Sincerely, not logic like, oh, logic on because this is the way I seen it. Logic on like the whole spectrum of, like, if you're trying to be logical about it, that's the way I would use it. But if we're talking about gaslighting is a way, it's in a sense a way of skewing truth or skewing events or finding the gray area in hopes that it can be in your way, right? Like the same, like I told you the story about the man who was doing bad things and was like telling his wife she's absolutely crazy, she doesn't see a gaslight on in the attic, that she's just nuts.
Oh, I think that's like understand like that I can understand easily. Like,
okay,
like
because we're
like,
using that in terms of physicality, but I'm talking about feelings.
Like, if like say a husband is having an affair and he's like, and the wife finds out, or the wife finds something, or she's like, oh, like I smell perfume, and he's like, I don't smell like perfume. You're just crazy. You're just
you're talking about physical.
You're like making stuff up. Like he just like tells her like, no, point blank, you're crazy. But you know, in terms of the like of an argument or a discussion, like, or whatever you want to call it, like a disagreement, and then you're going back and forth and you're disagreeing with each other, and then like I think there is where I feel like there's like a little bit of a
okay. So let's use that example. Like a man cheats on his wife, and he's like, oh, well, you smell like perfume, and he's like, no, you're crazy. But then it is found out, right, that
no?
Correct. That's a form of gaslighting, right? But let's say that they do find out, right? That she does find out and he is cheating, right? Now, a further form of gaslighting, right? Because it's the truth. He is the one that's cheating, right? A form of gaslighting would be like, well, I cheated because you did this. You don't remember this? You don't remember that? Well, you did this, or what did you expect me to do? Or like making her feel like she's crazy, and that truth that harmed her, that hurt her, was because of her.
Yeah, and we're in agreement there. But what I'm saying is, like, in other examples that aren't as severe, like say like you go to the grocery store and then you get mad, you and your wife get
usually
mad.
Gaslighting happens with people that you know.
Yes, so say like you go to the grocery store and you and your wife like disagree about something in the store, like you want to buy something and she says no, I don't want you to buy that, and then you're like, but I want to buy it, and then she's like, no, we're not gonna spend money on that, and like you don't buy it, you leave, and then you leave it there, and then you have a disagreement, you have an argument in the car, you're like, why are you stopping me from buying what I want to? And then she says, I'm not stopping you, I'm just telling you because it doesn't make sense for you to buy it, and blah blah blah. So you have this argument about something that's not so severe as like a cheating situation, but then
I'm so confused.
Like then you could then somebody like if say the wife says, oh, well, you're gaslighting me because you're saying that you were
so generic on your explanation that it's difficult to say if that was gaslighting or not.
Well, that's what I'm like. That's my point. It's like when it's,
but it's not so. But you're trying to be. Severe, you're trying to make it. You're trying to make it so obvious by trying to use logic on it.
But shouldn't you use logic?
On what? On your feelings?
No.
Should you be logical about your feelings?
No, on defining whether something is gaslighting or not. Shouldn't it be a logical process?
Yeah, with what your intention is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's what I mean. Like, how do you like?
How do I know my? How do you?
Like,
Would you know your
interpret-
intention?
Yeah, like I know my intention, but how do you tell somebody else what their intentions are?
Because you go through the process of like, this is what happened, this is what happened, and this is how. I don't know how to explain this to you, other Juan, than you are. It's an obvious thing that you do. Like, how long have we been talking about this? Damn it. Because I'm trying to
And I'm not trying to make it difficult for you. I'm just saying, like, I'm just saying, like I guess I'm just being the devil's advocate in a way, like just saying like how it's confusing, like, to some people, and I think for me it still is confusing in a way too, because I feel like I understand what the definition is, but I don't always understand the way it's used. Like, I don't always understand.
Here's okay. Let's even simplify it even more. Okay, how about you just don't gaslight?
Well, I don't gaslight, but
how about you just don't gaslight? How about you don't try to make sense of it, and just when you're using information, or you're using your words to skew the feelings of somebody else to make it sound like something else, you're gaslighting. Like, you know what you're doing.
And there is where the introduction of new terminology is like confusing, because then like you could be doing this behavior like for a while and you don't know that it's, and all of a sudden people start like telling you, but you're gaslighting, stop gaslighting, and you're like, what the hell does that even mean? I don't even know how I'm gaslighting. So that's where it like becomes confusing. So that's like to me, that's why I feel like when I hear new terminology like that I'm like, well, I don't even know what that means. So like, next thing I know, people are gonna be accusing me of gaslighting or being toxic masculinity, and I'm like, I don't even know what that means or what I did to like for you to say that I did that. So I think that's where I'm like, I think that's where it gets confusing, because I think like, yeah, I can like learn it, I can do the research and figure out what it means, and like then try to avoid that behavior. But for people who aren't gonna do that, who don't understand, who aren't gonna go there, and then all of a sudden like they're being called out for like gaslighting or for being a toxic male or whatever, like they don't even know what that means.
And are you done with your rant?
That's my like rant.
Are you done with your rant?
That's my rant. I just like, I feel like that's why I'm like, I feel like if we keep introducing these new terminologies, then people don't even understand what they mean. So how do we get people?
Wait, you remember that one scene on Mario's wedding where that little boy runs away and yells? What does he yell, Juan?
Which little boy?
The little boy when he runs away from the table when he got that signature.
You can't stop progress.
I'm sorry to tell you, Juan, but if it's terms that you're just bothered with, just learn them.
And it's not that I'm bothered. Like I said, I have learned them, and I do take my time to try to learn them. I over time, not immediately.
No, you don't.
Not immediately, but
don't. This is obvious you don't.
Eventually, over time, I try to learn. But I think about.
But you can't be so resistant to things that are happening. Like,
and I'm not so resistant, but
being gaslighting has always been a thing. It's always been a method. Just because they put a term to it doesn't mean that it's not, that it hasn't. Toxic masculinity has always been talked about, but we just use the term toxic masculinity. Gaslighting has always been a tactic.
But how about we just use the old words that we had and just
what words would you interpret now as gaslighting? What would you say?
Hey, you're making me sound like I'm crazy. Hey, you're making me like,
really?
You're making me feel like I'm crazy. Hey, you're making me like you're like denying what I'm saying, or you're like me estás echando así como a león, así como que you're like whatever, like you're cynical, or you know who the hell's wrong with you. Something wrong
instead
with
of saying all of that, you can easily use a term that's like, you know what, it sounds a lot like gaslighting.
So it's about like using a nicer word.
Not a nicer word. We know what it is. Like I hear the term gaslight and I know exactly what it means. Now, toxic masculinity, I'm still having some way of like understanding it completely. So I can, so not because I want to use it, but because I want to know what it means and what it is. You know, that one's taking me a little longer to understand completely, because the versus aspect of it is where I'm like, oh, well, what about you? Like, I question, things like, well, would that be this? Would that be that? Would that be this? Or maybe that sounds like this. And it does sound simple, But to me, the most simplest thing of knowing and understanding is gaslighting. Like gaslighting is a whole
Well, I
like
appreciate
thing.
you saying that, because I think that's like I think that's part of the process, is like figuring out what it means. And I think like I'm not I don't care what, like I'm not resistant to, like, if you want to use those words and you understand what they mean, I don't care. Like, it doesn't matter to me.
I don't use the word
But when you
gaslighting. Like I
start
never sit
talking
here,
to
come to you, and I'm
me
like, you're gaslighting me.
And if people start like introducing, like accusing me of something, then I'm like, well, hold on, I don't even know what that means. Like, before you, like, can you give me a definition of what you're accusing me of first, before you like start accusing
Yeah,
me
but
of
you can't be
gaslighting?
so. Here's
Or
the
like
thing with
before
you.
you start saying that I'm a toxic male, or before you start saying like other things like I'm mansplaining, or like, can
Mansplaining
you
me.
like tell me what it means that you're telling me before you start like insulting me?
Can you tell me why you're insulting me
Like,
first
what is
to
this
begin
insult
with?
that you're using? Like, let's stick to the
To start
insults
with,
that we
yeah.
know.
That we know.
Like, you can call me an asshole, you can call me a jerk. Like, I know what that means. But if you start calling me like toxic male, I'm like, what does that mean? Like, what are you saying to me?
Why? Because you want to combat it? Because you want to argue it?
understand. Like, I want to understand what I'm being accused of. If you know what I'm saying? Like,
No, I know what you're saying.
And I guess like what I'm saying is like, if I will take the time to like, but there's people out there, a lot of guys out there, who don't even maybe have never heard the word. So when all of a sudden they're being accused of being a toxic male, like, it's gonna be like, what?
A lot of things that we're talking about right now, it's just behaviors. They're behaviors that have helped, that haven't helped us thus far, that we should probably relook and revisit, and that maybe we should start eliminating those behaviors so we can have societally, so we can have a better way of communicating, right?
Yeah.
The whole process is to be able to communicate better. And I'm happy that this whole like gaslighting term, I think you're going to come around. I think you understand it. I think you're having difficulty with accepting that this is the way it is.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's like, I'm like I said, I'm not resistant to people using it. I'm not resistant. I just want to understand what it means, and I'm in the process of figuring that out. But I guess playing devil's advocate, I'm just like, well, what about the people that have never heard it? Like, you know, like there's still people that have never heard the word Latinx. So you tell them Latinx, and they're like, what the hell? Like,
At this point, I think that everybody
like,
has.
I'm Latino or I'm Hispanic. I'm not Latinx. I don't know what that means. So like, I think that there's all this new terminology that we're introducing. Like, people, like, it's gonna take time for people to understand what it is that we're talking about. Because it's so new, like, that you're still like not understanding.
I think right now what a lot of people feel is like we don't have time anymore to keep explaining to things. Like if this is the way it is, and you hear it being used, or you hear the terminology and you see it being used in text in black and white, I've understood now that the words and explanations aren't going to go away, and I need to inform myself and I need to educate myself fast.
And that's good, and that's a good, you do that. But I think that's where the whole thing of the herd mentality comes into question for me, is like when something becomes so popular that all these celebrities start using it.
But even Juan, even you use a very popular term, herd mentality.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden people
Did you always use that term, herd mentality? Because I didn't start hearing that word until I was an adult.
But
you're using it even now. You're even using popular like terminology, so you can't sit there and say like, "Oh, this is the way it is." No, what I'm saying is that.
I understand what you're saying.
Okay.
What I'm saying is like, when something becomes, like you said, people don't have time anymore, and people just start seeing these things everywhere. So that's what I'm saying. Like, when people just start seeing things everywhere, do you really understand why you're using it, or you're just using it because you're seeing it everywhere? And I think if you're just using it because you're seeing it everywhere, then that's a problem. Like, you should know what it is that you're using and why you're using it, as opposed to just using it because you see it, because all these people that you follow are doing it.
I don't know. When I see something, and I've learned this on my own, that now, especially in the day of social media, especially now in this time and age, things don't have ages to get around. It gets around fast. When you see it in black and white, and if you don't understand what it is and you don't know what it means, it's not going to go away. It's going to keep being used, and you need to, if you're like in the back of the class and you're like, can somebody redefine? Here's the thing, that you, in the day and age of internet, it's your responsibility to learn things. Nobody should explain to you what things are. You need to be, when you see it in text, when you hear it, you need to go and educate yourself what it is that they're talking about.
Yes, I can see that you can take on the responsibility, but I don't think that we should be in a society where you can't ask the question, like, what does this mean? Because if that's the point, if you're in a society where you can't even say, like, hey, I don't understand what that means, can somebody explain that to me? Then what are we doing? Like, why can't we ask questions? Like, why can't we talk to each other? Why can't we say that?
But half of the conversation is going to be me explaining to you, when you can just go learn what it is, and then we can discuss what it means. But if half of the process is me explaining to you what it is, this day and age, it's like, okay, so then what am I doing? Why am I educating you when I can educate myself and you can educate yourself in the process? But yeah, you're right. Like, if it's something completely out of left field where we're talking about things and people are there to educate us, then yeah, asking questions, definitely. But if half of the process is me explaining to you, then where's your responsibility?
I can see both points where you're coming. Where I can see both sides, I guess is what I'm saying. I can see both sides, but then, like, I don't know. Like, I feel like we have to be able to talk to each other too. Like, we can't be able to say, like, hey, you know what? Like, I don't know what that means, but you know what? I would like to try to understand it better. Because there's like, even if it's not controversial, like there's things like the different
but if you're being
traditions or things that happen in other cultures that I don't understand.
But and
I will ask the question, like, what does that mean, or what is the
here's the thing. But what is the point if at the beginning of the process, at the beginning of the situation, if the debate is simply using the term, then how can we get to the actual meat of the thing? Like, you're fighting me on the way to hunt. How can we get to the process? Like, well, how can we get to the meatiness of it? How can we debate the meatiness of it if you're just debating me, like, already at the forefront?
Well, if you're being hunted, I think or if you're being hunted, I think that your first reaction is going to be like, well, hold the like, why are you shooting an arrow at me? Why are you shooting guns at me? Like, hold on, what the fuck is going on here? Like, what's going why all of a sudden I have a target on my back? You know, I think so. That first, I think if you're being hunted, yeah. Like, but if you're not being hunted, then yeah, you can take the time to investigate yourself and do the research.
Well, you always got to. Well, here's the thing, Juan. Sometimes you always got to be on guard, and so you have to take responsibility and educate yourself. So you're not going to be hunted.
That's so stressful. Like life is already stressful. So why would you why have the mentality that you always need to be on the
defense?
Like, you always have to be like.
What was that?
Like, you always have to be like.
What is it?
Like, who's coming? I got to be in the defense. Like, you have to be like protecting yourself. Like, that's so exhausting. Like,
It doesn't take a lot of time to educate. Like, these things, they're not coming at you at textbook surface. Like, people are giving. But this day and age, things have been simplified.
So, I guess just when these new terminologies are coming out, I just need further explanations, and I need.
Don't explain anything. Don't start sending links to Juan.
Guys, I need patience.
No, Juan, just patience. Tell him like, hey. Like, aren't you on social? Like, aren't you on the internet? You can take 5 minutes out of your day to learn something.
But I feel like a lot of people are in the same position where they're confused or they don't understand. But I can also see what you're saying. Like, why is it your job to have to explain it? And I mean, yeah, that makes sense too.
If I'm going to debate you about something, I'd rather debate you to the meaty stuff. I don't want to debate you on like what you think it means. Mm-hmm. Like, I'd rather you be at the point where you know what it means, I know what it means, and we can debate there. Like, I prefer that than as opposed to be like, we're fighting at the door.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to fight you at the door. I want to fight you like in the kitchen. Like, I want to like be there and be like this and that, whatever. And
I think there has to be a happy medium somewhere. Like, at some point, like, there has to be a happy medium somewhere where, maybe you don't have to explain the whole thing, but maybe you could say, look, here's some articles that you should read before we have this conversation.
But that's not responsibility. But that's, again, you're placing responsibility on me.
I'm not saying it's like it would be your responsibility, but I'm saying, like, sometimes if you want to move the conversation forward, like, maybe you have to take a few extra steps.
You should, as a person who needs to learn.
Like, you as the person that needs to learn can take the action of saying, hey, well, I'm not really familiar. Can you, tell me, can you kind of give me some guidance? And you as a person that's already knows can be like, well, here, I'm not going to spend 30 minutes of my time explaining to you, but here's some links that I already have, and you can read this and you can figure it out for yourself, and then we can talk. Like, I feel like there has to be some form of communication, because otherwise, like, we're just like, oh, I'm not going to explain to you, and I'm not going to learn. So it's like, then you're not meeting anywhere.
No, but here's the thing, that I'm not going to lose out on it. Like, you're the one who's out there like in the dark, but I'm not.
But you are, because you're still going to continue having those encounters that you don't like.
That's easy. I just won't have the discussions with you.
But then
That's easy. Then I just won't have the discussions with you, and I can just move on and like do something else.
But then what happens? Then you just cut off a number of like people.
No,
life?
not people. People who just don't. Juan, when you go through a process, you don't. Okay, when you go to school, you don't learn the same things over and over and over and over and over. You go and you learn things new. Mm-hmm. Right? Every grade teaches you a whole other thing. I feel like it's the same thing. Like if you're learning a certain way, you move around in life a little bit. You kind of go left and you start learning other things. But if people want to stay still and they don't want to like, I think I'm giving like analogies that have nothing to do with anything. But yeah, I'm getting bad at this again.
No. We're just like. Mm-hmm. I think at this point we're like debating like beyond like the conversation that we're having.
I feel like I'm meeting you at the door and I'm like barely introducing. Like we've been married for 15 years and I feel like I'm reintroducing myself to you and I'm like, why am I doing this? Can you just come to the forefront and just basic stuff?
Yeah.
Just learn it.
But I mean, I think that this is I'm glad that we're having this conversation because I feel like it's probably like a conversation that a lot of people may relate to, because I think a lot of people are probably either where you're at or a lot of people are maybe where I'm at.
You feel a lot of people are where you're at.
Yeah, like I feel a lot of people will be where I'm at. A lot of people will be where you're at.
Yeah, we tend to think a lot of people feel the way we do because we feel it.
Yeah.
And that's not always true.
And that may not be true, but at least we're having the conversation
between me and you,
and we're like talking about it, and we're not just like glossing over it and saying like, oh yeah, well, we completely understand what this means, and some of us don't. Some of us don't, and we're trying to figure it out.
Me.
Me, we, and the people that agree with me.
Me and the two people behind me. Me and my friends.
Me and my friends, we agree on it. No, but it's a work in progress, guys. I mean, it is a work in progress, and again, this is only going to continue as I guess new terminology pops up. But what do you think? That's a good place to kind of stop the conversation, or do you want to?
No, this is a really great place to stop the conversation because I am confused a lot. Like, I don't know where to go or which. Why are you smiling at me for?
Because I know that after she listens to this episode, she's going to be like, okay, I'm going to come back and I need to, like, I have my bullets about and what I'm going to say and, what you said that that was wrong or that, like, I wanted to touch on. Which is good because I think that's part of the process. Like, I think,
for me it
should be like, I mean, that should be the conversation that we're having, not that we're not like afraid to have these conversations with each other, that we can be like, all right, you know what, I like, maybe that makes me look like an asshole, but I don't understand. And I'm going to be honest about it. All right, well, that's a good place to stop, I think, for this episode.
We didn't even get into what gaslighting really looks like, or we didn't get into like none of that. A lot of this debate was Juan just didn't understand and didn't care to understand and wants people to tell him. But I am emphasizing. There's a synopsis. If you're listening to the episode, just go to the end.
Just go to the end. Oh man. All right, guys. So on that note, we're gonna leave you for this episode. But I do want to. We're planning a fun episode for Halloween, and I'm excited about it because I'm actually gonna dress up. I haven't dressed up in a couple of years, but we're gonna dress up for the next episode, for Halloween episode, and it's gonna be fun. And so you can let us know if you have any ideas, if you want to guess at what we're gonna be, but it'll be fun. Yeah. So. I remind you, leave us a rating or review on Apple Podcast if you listen. If you know somebody who might enjoy the podcast, like you always say, let's tell your mom, tell your sister, tell
everybody,
tell your friend, tell everybody about this podcast and to listen. And when you leave us a rating or a review on Apple Podcast or both, it really helps us just to increase the number of people who can listen to our little show here. The best way you can help us is for free by either rating us a review or sharing our podcast. Absolutely. And with that, we're going to go and have dinner now, late. But we're going to go. And again, the music at the end is Edgar, and the music in between is Natalie, Anjelica's niece. So thanks to them for providing the music. Yeah. Bye. And with that, we'll see you next time. Recording.